y'all. This episode. Yeah. See, what had happened was I was supposed to be on this episode with a guest. I was going to be on this episode with Sal. And this episode was actually going to be dropped this weekend. And then I pushed it back to this Monday because, of course, you know, I'm doing these like the random impromptu, like whenever I feel like it episodes. And then like I hit Sal up and then I was like, oh, do I even want to bother him? And then, you know, and then I was like, look, I really don't want to, I'm on my period. Like, you know, I was like, I really don't want to leave my house, you know, and I don't want to harass him and be like, hey, come over here. You know what I mean? Like, I just didn't really want to be that guy. Right. Like, I just didn't want to be that guy. And so like I instead, and then two, I wanted this to be like, I wanted to give him like a good, well-rounded alien episode. And then this episode ended up being like less alien than I wanted to be. I was like, no. No. No, this isn't, you know, like, no, this isn't nearly the way, this isn't how I wanted it to be, you know? And so like, you know, it's a 3-day weekend. Mind you, I haven't been at work since like Thursday, but I ultimately just knew that like, girl, if she doing that thing again where she wants me to go get things when she can clearly go get them. So hold on. This dog, man, this dog here. And so, you know, I don't know. I hit him up and then I was like, he probably taking a nap. You know, I just didn't apply the impression. I was like, I'm going to record. If I hate it, you know, maybe I just won't publish it and then I'll record it again. Like, who cares? Right? Like, who cares? Like, I'm hot. You know, I got my heat pad on. I'm drinking a cranberry vodka. Like, it's just... like, I just... Anyway. So this episode... As you already know, this is season 3, episode 4. We on a slow boat to China here. And this episode today, we're doing on the Battle of Los Angeles. I don't know if you know anything about this. I don't know. I don't even know if you care, right? Like, I don't even know if you care. But this episode came to me in a dream. It didn't. It came to me in the middle of my sleep one morning. I was in a mid-sleep. I overheard an episode of History's Greatest Mysteries. I don't know if you've ever watched that show. It's on History Channel. It's a lovely show. You know, like, yeah, I think I'm almost positive that this show used to be another show back in the day. History in the Museum. No, I can't remember. Anyway, used to be another show and I think they rebranded it. But anyway, I love it. It's Lawrence Fishburne's a host. And so it was planned. The story was planned. And then on another night, just last week, I ran into the Ancient Aliens episode of this. And it wasn't even a full episode. I think it was just like, actually, it may have been Ancient Aliens because I know they did one, or it may have been Unexplained with William Shatner because, you know, your girl just stay on History Channel. Like, I fall asleep to either History Channel, horror movies, or MSNBC. You know, we got a theme going here. Or, you know, Unsolved Mysteries. That's another one. So, you know, but anyway, you know how I am about coincidences. So I was like, you know what? There's no coincidence that this just keeps popping up. And then in light of like the New Jersey drones, which I was actually at work talking about, I was like, where the fuck did the drones go? right? That they just came and went. And then like since LA had been like on the heart, on everybody's hearts and minds this week, and because of Kendrick's performance and like because of the LA fires, I decided to do this episode. And I wanted Sal on the episode because of his love of extraterrestrials and also because he's from LA, and I thought it was going to be a vibe, but I fucked it up, that's my bad. I should have did what I was supposed to do. Sal is supposed to be on this episode. So that's my bad. I'm supposed to be better about these things, but this is what happened when you have a 3-day weekend too, because it just escapes you. Because before I knew it, like I was out in the suburbs and then I was like, all right, I have a podcast to finish, So there's that. Now, where was I? Because I had to let Luna out of the room. All right. So it just felt right. For this episode, I read The Battle of Los Angeles, the history of the notorious false alarm that caused an artillery barrage over California during World War II by Charles River Editors. There are also some political elements in here. Now, look, I said that I wasn't going to be political this season. I said during the Jack Smith thing, I was like, I'm going to get this out of my system and then I'm going to be done. I did. And then I ended up doing the MLK report and now I'm doing this. Unfortunately, this is just what's happening. Okay. So just accept me for who I am right now. This is not a murder. And like I said, I will get back to a murder, but this was just interesting. I'm trying to clear my spirits here psychologically. So at this point, I'm just doing things that are interesting just to keep the podcast boat going. So I don't just completely fall off the map. So just bear with me while I lube up my juices. Oh God, what was that? Oh, I don't even know what that meant. That was just weird. But it does have some political elements in it, obviously. And it will lend some historical context to the conversation we're having right now about like who we are when we're faced with mass hysteria and what it means to be an immigrant for some people. So we're going to dive in. The poison on this episode is the Saints of LA. I found this cocktail and it actually sounds wonderful. Okay. I don't play with tequila, but it has tequila in it. You can have tequila. Tequila makes me a little horny. Okay. 2 ounces of silver tequila, 1 ounce of pineapple juice, 1 ounce of fresh lime, 1/2 ounce of agave, 4 to 5 fresh basil leaves, and a splash of club soda. You muzzle the basil leaves in a shaker. You add iced tequila, lime juice, pineapple juice, and agave, and you shake for 15 seconds and you strain it in a highball glass with clubs, and you add just a little bit of club soda, and then you garnish it with lime, and boom, you got yourselves the Saints of LA. That will be a summer cocktail, because that sounds lovely. That absolutely sounds lovely. So I cannot wait to try that. Okay. Sip. And this summer, I will get back to actually drinking what I'm curating. I used to be so good about that. I used to be good about a lot of things. Let's just be honest. I used to be good about a lot of things, but, whatever. Whatever. Now we're going to start from the beginning per usual. America in all of its colonizing and imperialistic glory had a relationship with Japan prior to the 1930s and 1940s. And it went all the way back to the 1850s. We even fought alongside Japan in World War I while supporting the Allies. And then in the 1920s, things got a little sticky. There was an Immigration Act that banned Japanese immigration altogether. Now, it was in 1931 when Japan tried to expand its empire and invade in Manchuria that the U.S. was getting a little irritated with Japan. by 1937. Japan even launched a full-scale invasion of China, which led to the Second Sino-Japanese War. Now, the U.S. supported China by sending aid and weapons. Americans turned against Japan. This is very similar, right? It's similar to Russia's war on Ukraine, where we've sent we've sent weapons and aid to Ukraine, but hundreds of thousands of Chinese civilians died. So Japan joined the Axis powers, which was Germany and Italy, forming the Tripartite Pact in 1940. Now, by July 1941, Japan would occupy French Indochina, which was Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. And that threatened the British and Dutch colonies in Southeast Asia. Now, this was a red flag to the U.S. Like, this looked like Japan wanted to take over the entire Pacific. They couldn't do that. Okay? They were like, why are you doing that? Now, needless to say, while we helped China, we weren't doing this out of the goodness of our hearts here. The U.S. interests in the Pacific before and during World War II were both strategic and economic. The Pacific was vital for trade routes, military positioning, and for resources. And the U.S. wanted to maintain its influence in the region for both security and economic prosperity. Now, the U.S. responded by freezing Japanese assets and cutting off exports of oil, steel, and rubber, all essential for Japan's military. This sounds familiar, right? Because this happened to Germany. Now, Japan depended on the U.S. for 80% of its oil. So this embargo crippled Japan's economy and its war machine. So the U.S. offered to lift the sanctions if Japan withdrew from China and Indochina. But Japan refused because, look, we invested too much already. So no, we're not. We're not pulling out of China. We're not pulling out of Indochina. Japan's goal was to disable the U.S. Pacific Fleet, allowing them to expand without the United States interfering at all. So instead of backing down, Japan decided to strike first. On December 7th, 1941, the Japanese Imperial Navy launched a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor in Hawaii. The Japanese aircraft, fighters, bombers, and torpedo planes attacked in two waves. Now, I'm sure Japan feels much differently about this, but in the book that I read, they said that the Japanese did this. It was kind of sloppy, right? The reason why they were so successful in this attack is they did it early in the morning. The U.S. did not see it coming. They focused on the U.S. battleships, the airfields, and other military installations, and a total of 8 battleships were damaged or sunk, including the USS Arizona and the USS Oklahoma. There were more than 300 aircraft that were destroyed or damaged, and over 2,400 Americans were killed, including military personnel and civilians. Now, the reason for the attack was, in my opinion, on brand. America was not minding their business. Look, I am in no way, shape, or form saying that I'm not thankful for the privileges that I have been afforded, but there is more than one way to skin a cat, okay? America's breach, we tend to not know how to mind our business. And we do this even today. These imperialistic approaches to just going to foreign lands and feeling like just because we trade with them or just because, we need the route or whatever, that we should just have it. Those types of things are just insane to me. Unfortunately, the reality is that just like with us, we don't want people in our space. They don't want us in theirs. We don't want people coming over into our area and teaching us their ways of life. They don't want us in theirs teaching our way of life. In my opinion, both the U.S. and Japan were acting up. Both the U.S. and Japan were engaged in imperial expansion and resource extraction, period. The U.S. acquired Hawaii, the Philippines, and Guam. And Japan, on the other hand, they were seeking to establish a greater East Asia co-prosperity sphere, which involved dominating East and Southeast Asia under Japanese rule, which to me, that's Asian business, right? Was it fair given our relationship with China? Absolutely not. But at the same time, it's kind of like, still Asian business, right? Like sometimes I'm just like, we like to engage in shit and then be mad when it backfires. With that being said, Japan was frustrated. They did act in a very extreme way. And that ultimately led to us entering the war, which was incredibly catastrophic. On December 8th, 1941, President Franklin Delano Roosevelt gave his famous Day of Infamy speech. Congress declared war on Japan, bringing the U.S. into World War II. Now that day, excuse me, an alert went out in San Francisco that caused a bit of a panic. The hysteria lasted for a few days through the next several months. And in San Francisco, due to like these air raid warnings, LA was equally terrified. Like the whole Western seaboard was just like freaking out because, of course, this is on the Pacific coast. The attack came with paranoia over another attack on the Pacific coast. California was on high alert of a potential enemy attack or another Japanese raid. Americans were tense. The government had raised taxes to fund the war. People were mad about the loss of life. There was heightened patriotism. This led people to volunteering to help the war effort. But then there was animosity. Prejudice against the Japanese Americans increased before Pearl Harbor, but after the FBI started getting tips of espionage and sabotage with little to no evidence. Okay, sound familiar? Just talked about this with communism. Okay, we're doing this right now with Mexicans. This led to Executive Order 9066, signed by FDR. On February 19th, which is in 2 days, what I tell y'all, this happens to me a lot. The order authorized the U.S. military to designate certain areas as military zones and remove people from those areas. Now, the order didn't mention Japanese Americans by name. It led to their forced relocation into internment camps in California, Wyoming, Utah, Arizona, Arkansas, Colorado, Mississippi, New Mexico, and Montana. Between 110,000 and 120,000 Japanese Americans were forcibly removed from their homes, businesses, and farms. They were given little to no time to pack up. Many of them lost their possessions, and they were sent to internment camps. These camps were scattered across the U.S., often in remote desert locations. Poorly constructed barracks surrounded by barbed wire and armed guards. It's given Auschwitz, right? Now, what's crazy about this, and just to fast forward to where we are right now, soapbox moment. Brown, anybody who's non-white need to really understand this and understand this very clearly. You are not American if you are not white. Full stop. Okay? Stop thinking you are. Stop thinking that just because you are not black and that your proximity to whiteness makes you comfortable because you get treated better than black people, that you are scot-free because you got the game fucked up. Because I'm going to tell you right now, when shit goes down and something like this happens, you will be the first to go. Okay? You feel safe because, I don't have an accent and I go to brunch with Frank. Okay, but you're not white, my guy. Because let me reiterate, between 110,000 and 120,000 Japanese Americans were forcibly removed. These people were American. Yeah, born here or had citizenship, and they still put them in camps. Don't get the game fucked up, baby. If you are not white, you are not American. See, the conditioning. Who was it? It was Lyndon B. Johnson who said, and I'm paraphrasing here, this idea that when you give people somebody to look down on, specifically, he was talking about poor whites in this capacity, but I'm going to use the other minority. Let's say the model minority. We're going to say Asian, since we're talking about Asians here. We're going to take the model minority. They gave you someone to look down on. Black and brown. Say Mexican. Fuck it. As a distraction. As a safety zone. As a comfort. But when it gets really real, and when it's time to clean some shit up like they're doing right now, you going too. Look what they did to Vivek Ramaswamy and Kash Patel. They thought they were safe because they were Indian American. Please. No, don't get it twisted. Just because you sit at brunch with them does not mean you're safe. Ever. Ever. And that goes to Latinos as well. Don't think you're that safe because you're never that safe. That's where you got fucked up during the election, by the way. You voted against your own immigrant family, your own immigrant family's interests, because I got in the right way. There's no such thing as getting in, actually. Though there's no such thing as getting in because you're not white. FDR, who people love him, signed that executive order 9066 that authorized those military zones to designate putting Japanese people in concentration camps, to forcibly remove tax-paying immigrants from their homes, businesses, and farms. You think they won't do that to you? Cool. Interestingly, the majority of Japanese Americans were either U.S. citizens by birth or had been U.S. citizens for decades. Despite their legal status, they were treated as suspects based purely off of their ethnicity. The internment camps were overcrowded, poorly maintained. They lived in harsh, isolated conditions. They had zero privacy. The families were split up. No adequate food. Lacked medical care. No schooling. Fast forward to the 1980s, the U.S. government issued a formal apology. And guess what? They even offered them reparations, believe it or not, through the Civil Liberties Act of 1988, saying that the internment violated their civil rights. Moving along, on the night of February 24th, 1942, the Office of Naval Intelligence warned the West Coast that they should be ready for another attack within the next 10 hours. And on February 23rd, the previous day, when the Japanese submarine I-17, operated by Kozo Nishini, fired 16 shells into Elwood oil field near Santa Barbara, California. Luckily, there were no casualties, and they managed to catch the 2 Japanese soldiers. Now, this account, I'm going to say, the Japanese submarines kind of here, kind of there, kind of not. Like, there are some people who said it happened. There are some people who said it didn't happen. I've seen accounts where it happened more than it didn't. So I put it in here because it seems like it did. They claim that this actually did happen. But on the 24th, the day after the submarine attack, the U.S. military was bracing themselves. They received reports of flares and blinking lights near defense plants. At 7:18, the first yellow alerts were issued. Now, a yellow alert was a level of military readiness, which was used during World War II to indicate like a state of caution. It was a response to threats. So it was like a part of like a color-coded system. It was used by the military to communicate the level of the threat or a danger to the public. The system was designated to like give clear instructions to alert the public, to like perform a particular way. And so the yellow alert specifically indicated a moderate threat, signaling that the enemy activity was possible or imminent. It was one step below red, which signified a full-scale emergency or an attack. But during yellow alert, citizens were often instructed to take precautionary measures like seek shelter or get ready for an air raid, or just to be prepared for further notifications. So by 10:23, they said, you know what? Never mind. False alarm. At 11 p.m., the LA Coast Guard detected an unknown aircraft flying near restricted airspace. The United States was already on edge, and there were rumors of enemy planes in the area. Now, because they already had one false alarm, they didn't really want to jump to any conclusions. They monitored it, and eventually it vanished. At around 2 a.m. on the 25th, they got another blip. Now, this was 120 miles west of LA, and it looked like it was headed straight to the city. The anti-craft city centers across the city were placed on yellow alert. And at 2:15, 2 more anti-craft centers confirmed the blip. At 2:21, a blackout was ordered. Now, I want to talk about these blackouts. Now, my mom, who, most of you know, lived in LA for a period, she had originally told me about LA's rolling blackouts, but I only knew about rolling blackouts during heat waves. During heat waves in Atlanta, Jesus Christ, in LA to this day, they have rolling blackouts for conservation of energy. So she would tell me about like when everybody's running air, they'll just like cut your shit off. They'll just stop. And it's not even like, oh, everybody's power went off. Like this is like a orchestrated blackout. And so, as I was, researching this, it was interesting to learn that during World War II, they did this too, but for a totally different reason. Now, these blackouts were part of a larger civil defense strategy to protect the city from potential air raids. And this was particularly because of Pearl Harbor. The main goal of the blackout drill was to prevent enemy bombers from using city lights to identify targets during an air raid. So the idea was that by turning off all the lights in the city, it would be harder for bombers overhead to find any important targets. So like military air bases, defense installations, any of the civilian infrastructure. So the drills would also help prepare normal, ordinary citizens for a real emergency by teaching them how to respond quickly and safely in an actual air raid. I mean, you would think it's useful too, because they always say that, you know, you should run drills in your own house. Like you should know how to move around your house in the dark, you know. Like I went to gun class recently. Like I passed my concealed carry license class. And he said, even after you get your gun, you should learn how to move around your house with your gun in the dark. You know, that should just be like a drill. Now they hoped that these drills would reduce panic and confusion in the case of a real attack. And it actually does make sense because, you know, take your house, for example. If somebody breaks into your house and it's pitch dark in your house, they don't know how to move around your house. They don't know where the furniture is. They don't know where this is. They don't know. They're going to trip, fumble, fall over furniture. You are not. You know what I mean? Like, you know where the nightstand is. You know where your accent table is. You know where the stairs are. They don't. And so unless they have on night goggles, which is like, oh my God, you're a spy. Just take everything because you are way more prepared. So during the drills, when the air raid sirens went off, it signaled the beginning of the drill. And all the civilians needed to immediately turn off all the lights and they needed to take cover. But everyone in the city was expected to turn off all the exterior lights, all of the street lights, all of the car headlights, any visible lights from the buildings or the homes. They had to, use blackout curtains, blackout window covers. They had to absolutely make sure that no light escaped. People were instructed to go to designated air raid shelters, to take cover in their homes. Many citizens kept emergency supplies. They had flashlights, food, water, battery powered radios, you know, the whole thing, which there's a girl on TikTok I follow. Oh my God. She does, which is very cool. She goes to a lot of thrift stores, and she buys atomic age items and food. Believe it or not. I wish I could find. It was some show on Amazon, I guess. I think it was a video game first. And it was like a show that took place during the atomic age. And they ended up making it a TV show. I can't remember the name. But her content is basically where she goes, I don't know where she finds this shit, to be totally honest. But she opens like 50-year-old food, like bunker food, you know, like condensed milk and like, what do you call that water that's like purified canned water that people would keep in a doomsday bunker? She opens that shit from like the 1940s. Like I to this day, I don't think she tells people where she finds this stuff, probably because she knows people would probably go to those places to try to find it. I'm assuming she lives near or around somewhere that is a naval base or knows somebody who has access to old like naval or army military material. But that's all she does. Like her content is that. And she was the first. Her content was where I learned about, I think it's called atomic glass, that has like trace amounts of radiation. Like if you go to the Goodwill store, I guess back in like the 40s or whatever, glass, like glassware, like normal cups, stuff like that, had trace amounts of oh my God, I swear, y'all, this is why I need to stop drinking. I really do. Because my memory is slowly fading into absolute darkness. I'm going to Google it. Here it is, atomic glass. So here it is. I guess it has like trace amounts of grain in it that I guess is like radioactive residue. And she uses one of those like meters. So she'll go to like a random Goodwill store and she'll use one of those meters, whatever the meter is called. And under a certain light, you can see it because it glows green. It's really cool. I really wish I could find her name, but she has some really cool content. And I was just like obsessed because she would be like opening old cans of crackers and shit, like old, because it was supposed to be, supposed to last, it's supposed to last for like years or whatever. And she'll open and she'll pretend like she's eating it. And you're not like cause you can't see her face. You can only see her hands. So she'll just be like opening like a can, like an air sealed can of cornbread or like an air sealed can of cake. And I'm saying cake because it would have to be air sealed. And then like the can, she'll pop the can open and then within the can will be like a pack, like a tight pack, like almost like vacuum sealed. And then she'll cut that open. And she has all the tools, how they would open cans a particular way, like how they will open like canned goods a particular way. She knows how to open all that shit. It's almost like how there's just some people who are just like tapped in a certain time periods. Like she's one of those people, like you could tell she's super into the 40s. She's super into that atomic age period. I digress, but she's got such great content. Her name is like Miss something, but if you know of the Amazon show, there's an Amazon show that is based off a video game that's based off the atomic age. Just Google that and then try to Google her TikTok. You will find her. You're welcome. If you're interested in any of what I'm talking about, I'm pretty sure her name is Miss something, Miss Burnout, Miss something out. Brain don't work. Moving on. So my point is they used to have to, get these emergency supplies or whatever. They would have to get ready for these drills. So basically they were doomsday prepping. And these anti-aircraft units and all these other military forces were prepared because they were also doing these like practice runs. They would do these response system runs and, acting like they were doing like these real attacks. So the military was on standby to engage at any moment. Okay. The air raid wardens would drive up and down the street to make sure that the people complied. They would make sure that it was absolutely dark. These drills were typically monthly or bi-weekly. But as time went on, the frequency increased. So at 3:16 a.m., the 37th Coast Artillery Brigade started firing half-caliber machine gun and 12.8 pound anti-aircraft shells at what they believe were enemy aircraft. Over 1,400 rounds were fired. Now, witnesses said it was like a volcanic eruption. The expectation was that the planes and bombs were falling from the sky. Like one witness was this actor and writer. His name was Buck Henry. He said, quote, "We imagined parachutes dropping, the hills of Hollywood on fire. We imagined hand-to-hand combat on Rodeo Drive." Like it was loud. People were hopping on top of buildings. They said it was a spectacle. spectacle. Like it was just like all you could see was just them shooting at something in the air, right? So pilots from the 4th Interceptor Command were notified, but their planes stayed on the ground. The decision not to launch the planes may have been based on the lack of confirmed targets. I mean, they were like, we're not going to send any aircraft into a hostile situation when we don't have any clear intelligence. Like, what are you talking about? Like, we don't know of anything going on. And so the artillery units were ordered to engage with the targets. And even though there was no clear confirmation that there was actually an enemy plane, searchlights were deployed to illuminate an aircraft, right? So the artillery fire continued for an hour until about 4:14 in the morning. At 7:21 a.m., the all clear. They were like, yo, you can stop. They lifted the blackout order, and thank God they did, because that blackout caused chaos. With the lights turned off, visibility was so limited. Drivers could barely see where they were going. There were car accidents everywhere. People were panicked. People were rushing to find shelter. People were absolutely terrified on the ground. Some people were mesmerized because, oh my God, this is crazy. This is finally happening. But then 2 people died of a heart attack. They just they died of a heart attack because 1, it was incredibly dark. 2, there's a lot of shooting going on. First of all, let's just be honest. Like I said, I went to a gun range. So I went to a gun range. I want to say it was in January. And it was in January for sure, because it was before I went back to work after Christmas. And Dirty Harry was next to me in the range. If you don't know what and by Dirty Harry, I mean Clint Eastwood. He had the largest revolver. Oh my God, it was a cannon, right? I swear it was the largest. As a person who had never been to the gun range before, to hear a gun that loud, that close to you was like, oh my God, I cannot get used to this. I had a couple next to me with an AR-15. I had people next to me just pop, 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 pop. And then him, boom. I was just like, oh my God, right? On top of that, I'm in a well-lit room around who I think is normal, because I also feel like in a gun range, you never know when somebody gonna snap. That place is actually quite dangerous when you think about it. But I'm just keeping it a buck. That place is dangerous as fuck. I personally feel like gun ranges should not be open ranges. I feel like they should be enclosed rooms for each person. I think each lane should have a door, especially with the way people go postal and start shooting people, because having that many people with guns in one room and it's just open like that is wild. I'm sorry. That's just crazy to me. But just to think about the fact that all of that is happening in darkness. Now, just think about in present day. You are on your way from the store, right? You've been doing this drill for however long. You all been practicing this drill. You know the drill. You know when those air raids go off, those sirens go off, you are supposed to do this thing, whether it be stop your car or get to safety or whatever it is. But maybe you were just on your way home, and maybe you were just on a dark street, and maybe, I don't know, you were not too far from where they're shooting, and you're just in the thick of it. And maybe you're a 68-year-old man, and all of this activity is happening, and 1,400 artillery rounds just fire off nonstop for an hour. And you don't know what they're shooting at. And you don't know if what they're shooting at is going to shoot back or drop bombs. You would probably have a heart attack and die too. Matter of fact, I don't even think you need to be 68 for that to cause a heart attack. The kids were frazzled. The women were frazzled. Now, mind you, there were also people who crazy and was just like start shooting at it too, which I'm like, and what are you going to do with your gun? It's like, okay. But during that type of confusion, like in pitch dark between and the only light is what they're shooting. You know what I mean? That's the only light. That morning, the papers were printed. The headline was, "Identity of the aircraft veiled in mystery. Civilians report seeing planes and balloon." That same paper released a photo of 8 beams of searchlights that were centered on an object. And this object was shaped like a disc, but it's believed that this was a photo, even like photoshopped. But even back then, they were like, it may have been doctored. But it was still weird. And people had questions. Like, what the fuck happened last night? Explain yourself. Like, I need you to explain yourself. Like, that was a lot of activity for you to just be like, we don't know what that was. You know what I mean? Come on. You got 2 heart attacks last night. And if I'm not mistaken, I saw a couple of accounts where 3 other people died too. So you got 2 heart attacks. You got 5 people that perished. And you're just like, businesses think there were structurally that were shot. What happened? What was that? So news agencies were confused, and rightfully so. Japanese planes were shot down, but no wreckage. Jets crashed, but no wreckage. Rumors that there was wreckage, but then they were recovered and secretly removed. People were like, oh, well, somebody came out and they covered the wreckage with a tarp. And people started to talk about how they saw planes. There were planes everywhere. One witness was like, I could barely see the planes, but they were up there all right. I could see 6 planes and shells were bursting all over them. Of course, the Japanese the hatred didn't stop. They doubled down. U.S. government ordered the evacuation of Southern California area of all Japanese, alien and American. And this was because 30 or so Japanese Americans were accused of signaling the enemy planes with flares and flashlight patterns. So Japanese people were accused of suspicious blinking lights emanated from the family homes and were apprehended and sent to the concentration camps. Now, there were some rational thinkers. Some people thought that this was an overly embellished drama. For why, you may be asking? Sales. Straight up. Sales. Newspapers were selling blacked out curtains and shades. And newspapers themselves, magazines, they raised taxes for the war efforts, why not? But there was a 6-year-old from Redondo Beach that claimed to have seen a giant object that was rectangular in shape, flat with rounded corners. There were multiple sightings of this. Hundreds. Some saw a balloon. Some saw a big floating object or a big magic lantern. One witness even saw no lights. Saw something with no lights or sign of windows. And that object made no sound. But he did feel a vibration in his chest as it passed, which I'm like, you probably felt the vibration from all the guns being shot. The accounts were all over the place. V-shaped, oblong, 1 plane, 25 planes, civil plane, military plane, fast plane, hovering plane. I mean, just seems to have depended on who was looking. And either way, they all vanished. And with all of this shooting, none were shot down. That's like my uncle. My uncle sometimes hates action films because he's like, all this shooting, ain't nobody really get shot. He's one of them people who's like, all this shooting, everybody should be dead. Some people believe they had heard explosions or seen bombs falling. Others were not actual bombs, had no, I mean, others had not seen bombs, but then there were no actual bombs. during the incidents. So some witnesses claim to have seen enemy aircraft, and thought that, they saw Japanese bombers flying in the sky, but there were no confirmed reports of any enemy planes. But this was not limited to civilians. Military thought they saw something too. Within hours of the event, Secretary of the Navy Frank Knox held a press conference stating that it was a false alarm. And the case was war nerves. It's like, oh, okay, thanks, Frank. Paraphrasing, there was no indication that enemy aircraft was in the area. Our defenses responded to what we believed was a false alarm. It is possible that the objects seen in the sky were weather balloons or other phenomena, but no bombs or enemy planes were located. The defense forces acted in accordance with their training, and all available means of protection were used. This was a precautionary action, but it was a false alarm. Given the recent attack on Pearl Harbor, the anxiety among the people and the military was understandable, but it appears that this was a case of overreaction. The public should rest assured that there is no danger to the safety of the city or the country. We are fully prepared to respond to any threat, though. The next day, on February 26th, the Army made statements. They said, look, the radar detection and the subsequent artillery fire was the result of a, quote, combination of misidentification, nervousness, and wartime hysteria. My bad. They acknowledged that the unidentified objects were most likely not enemy aircraft, but may have been weather balloons, false radar signals, or other non-enemy sources. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I got my humidifier going, so it's bringing shit up. The Navy and the Army were not on the same page. The U.S. Army and the U.S. Navy had distinct roles in the coastal defense and the air defense. And these roles overlapped sometimes. And that led to confusion. The Army's coast artillery was responsible for defending coastal areas with anti-aircraft artillery and searchlights. Navy operated the ships and naval aviation units responsible for offensive operations and coastal defense. And in the case of this, the Army took the lead in responding to the aerial threat, whether it was real or not, along the coast, while the Navy was mostly not involved in the ground-based defense. Now, the Army's radar systems detected the objects, while the Navy's aerial patrols may have been involved in trying to assess what was happening. There was no clear coordination between the Army and the Navy. Neither could confirm what the target was. The Army fired based on the radar and what they saw, while the Navy had aircraft that might have been sent up, but they didn't use it. They disagreed on what happened overall. The Army was quick to say that there had been misidentification or false alarm, but the Navy, which responsible for monitoring the aircraft, they were reluctant to accept that no enemy planes had been involved. Now, with these conflicts, came speculation about whether or not any of this was even real at all. Was this a cover-up? Was this a cover-up? Y'all covering something up? The Long Beach Independent newspaper published on February 26, 1942, quote, "There is a mysterious reticence about the whole affair. And it appears that some form of censorship is trying to halt discussion on the matter," end quote. The newspaper expressed concerns about the lack of transparency and the military's reluctance to provide a clear explanation. And I kind of understand where they are. I personally just feel like they don't fucking know. And it could be a cover up because they like, yo, we look stupid as fuck. You know, we fucked up. Because I tell you what, if I was in charge of the U.S. Army or the Navy and we performed this badly, I'd be like, nigga, no, we fucked up real bad. We either need to pretend like there was something up there, Japanese, alien, or somewhere in between. You hear me? We need to pretend like it's something up there. We done use 1,400 rounds of taxpayer dollars. We need to pretend like there's something up there. So what are the theories? What do we have here? Japan will be number one. Japanese submarines might have been responsible for the attack on the 23rd, but there was no concrete evidence that there was any Japanese aircraft or forces involved. Not fucking one. Sorry. Weather balloons. That's the other one. There's always weather balloons. Weather balloons are large balloons used to carry instruments that measure and transmit data about the atmosphere. They're made out of latex or rubber. Weather balloons can expand to great sizes as they rise due to decrease in air pressure, and they can reach diameters of up to like 8 feet before bursting. They're attached to a radiosonde, which is a small, like lightweight device. I think they have like a candle in them or some shit, but they measure like the temperature, the humidity, the air pressure. At that time, they were good because they would kind of help the military. They were great for the military. The military, they launched these bitches all the time. They launched them in the U.S. for sure because it helped them even with detecting the wind. They needed to know the direction and speed of the wind. Now, weather balloons, if launched at night, could appear as bright lights or strange objects in the sky, leading to confusion and overreaction by the military. Given the time, it could be a miscommunication. They could have threw a couple of balloons up in the air. Then the sirens went off, and then they were like, shit. You know? They hit the radar. And because of how paranoid everybody was, which I'm kind of like, I think that's very important since you know that they will throw some weather balloons up in the air, that it's very important that these two departments communicate with each other. I would say that would be at the tippy top of my list. But during World War II, who else released weather balloons? Japan. They launched thousands of weather balloons. They were known as Fugo. They launched them across the Pacific specifically to create panic in the United States, but they weren't really used until much later. They were equipped with small bombs and they were designed to start fires, but they didn't start using those until later. Now, there's also just confusion and failed communication as an excuse. The radar operators, the coastal defense units, and the fighter aircraft were not well coordinated, period. It's obvious these people sucked. And the incident were marked by conflicting reports. So, for example, the radar detected an unidentified object, which led to a full-scale military response, including searchlights and anti-war craft fire. However, there was no clear communication to confirm that the targets were hostile. But because of their heightened sense of, freak out, they were like, fuck it, shoot it. Which brings me to the New Jersey drones. My opinion about the New Jersey drones, I only wanted to bring that up because I always thought it was very interesting, the handling of the New Jersey drones. There's a couple of, I know there's a couple of theories about the drones, and people's opinions about the drones. Like, I think one of them was like, one of Elon Musk's brother had a company, had a drone company or something that was doing... he had a drone company or whatever that people were thinking he was, just playing around or whatever. But to me, what infuriated me about the New Jersey drone thing, especially as I was reading this situation, was like, since when we okay with shit just being in airspace? Like, when we okay with that? Like, we have never been okay with drones just being in airspace. Because why are we just, when I think about what they did in 1942, because at first I was like, well, maybe what it is they don't want to have a crazy response like they did in 1942. You know what I mean? Maybe they don't want to just abruptly start shooting in the New Jersey night sky. You know what I mean? Maybe that's the thing. Maybe they didn't. If it is true that the 2024 drones were real or whatever they were, who knows what they were? I still don't, I don't know. I haven't really figured out what that was, whether it was military or not. But we just let foreign objects just fly around. These things were in the sky for seconds, and these people had a full-scale military response. And they were like, my bad, we overreacted. My bad, we overreacted. We probably shouldn't have did that. But then what happened in New Jersey last year was like, oh, I mean, we don't know what that is, but it's cool. And then it just kind of went away. Nothing? Is that nothing we should talk about? Like, I just don't understand what's happening anymore. I'm trying to understand what I'm missing with that, because I don't understand why that was so okay. And there were so many reportings of people just being like, I honestly don't, the lack of concrete communications there. When you do not give people enough evidence, you leave them with enough room to just make stuff up. And while here we are in 2025 and we do not see them anymore, the fact that these things just flat out disappear, you just okay with that? And I think that's why a lot of people just settled on the fact that it was Elon Musk's brother. They were just like, I guess it has something to do, or maybe it just flat out has something to do with Russia. Maybe it was just psychological warfare, because some people also just figured it's one of those things, which is my next bullet point with this, psychological warfare. It could, like in this case, by Japan or the U.S. military to create fear after Pearl Harbor. The obvious reason for Japan, to scare you. But for the U.S., you could test the public's reaction. Were the New Jersey drones to test our reaction? And like I said before, with this Japan situation and the war, I also think you could do this to, boost interest in a war effort, to raise taxes, to scare people. The drones didn't particularly scare us because we were like, I hope it's aliens. Maybe they'll wipe us off the face of the planet. Maybe with some luck, we'll get wiped off the face of the earth. Now, the one explanation that I'm most interested in is mass hysteria and panic. Now, with Pearl Harbor, the people and military personnel on the West Coast were anxious and alert to the threat of Japanese attack. The panic created by the military and their alerts could have led to false sightings where soldiers and civilians on high alert misinterpreted clouds, planes, or even spotlights as an actual aerial threat. And so the enemy could have been nothing more than a collective delusion. This event also occurred after the War of the Worlds broadcast, created by Orson Welles in 1938. And this was one of the most famous controversial radio broadcasts in history. If you do not know what that is, Orson Welles was as you know, Citizen Kane. That's my boy. It was at the time was a young radio director. He was an actor. He decided to broadcast an adaptation of H.G. Wells' 1898 novel, The War of the Worlds, which tells the story of an alien invasion of Earth by Martians. The radio version was broadcast on October 30th, 1938, as part of the Mercury Theater on the Air, a series of radio dramas produced by Orson and his team. And instead of airing it as a traditional drama with actors and sound effects, Orson Welles and his team presented it as a news broadcast documentary. So the program began with music and a weather report, followed by an announcement that there was a special report from Grover's Mill. It was like a New Jersey where a mysterious explosion had occurred. And then the news report became increasingly alarming as Martians began to attack these major cities, and like listeners were tuning in late though, and they thought that the broadcast was actually a news report and it was about a real invasion. And so the news bulletin was of a certain style, and so that key factor is why it seemed so real. And the breaking news format was designed to sound like a live on the scene report, which helped create the illusion of a real-time emergency. The many listeners that tuned in after the broadcast started, when they missed the opening disclaimer, it made a lot of people confused. So the reports caused, there was a lot of mass panic. They claimed people were like fleeing the city. People were calling the police. People were, praying and all this other stuff. They also claim this is like slightly exaggerated, but some people were really like starting to pack and like were assuming that there was a true Martian invasion. Now, mind you, this was really only concentrated in New York, where a significant portion of the audience was tuned in. But some people did reportedly try to escape in their cars and on foot. And the police and the emergency responders were inundated with calls. I'm going to play a clip. Here it is.
Ladies and gentlemen, we interrupt our program of dance music to bring you a special bulletin from the Intercontinental Radio News. At 20 minutes before 8 Central Time, Professor Farrell of the Mount Jennings Observatory, Chicago, Illinois, reports observing several explosions of incandescent gas occurring at regular intervals on the planet Mars. The spectroscope indicates the gas to be hydrogen and moving toward the Earth with enormous velocity. Professor Pearson of the observatory at Princeton confirms Farrell's observation and describes the phenomenon as, quote, like a jet of blue flame shot from a gun, unquote. We now return you to the music of Ramon Raquello, playing for you in the Meridian Room of the Park Plaza Hotel, situated in downtown New York.
So, needless to say, the War of the Worlds broadcast demonstrated how easy it is and was to convince people of a false threat and make Americans, a little more susceptible to panic in the face of actual threats. So, that's the thing, I don't really know how to... I don't really know how to read this. I'm leaning towards mass panic on this one, but there's one more. And without further ado, UFOs. This one is not as sensational, but I'm going to honor it since it's slightly fun, but it's not as deep. I want to add that although sci-fi novels did exist, the idea of UFOs didn't come about until like 1947, which is about 5 years after this event. When Kenneth Arnold, who was a pilot, reported seeing 9 strange crescent-shaped objects flying near Mount Rainier in Washington. He described their flight pattern as like saucers skipping across water, which led to the term flying saucers. Now, the sightings was one of the first high-profile encounters, but the term didn't really become popular until 1943. I'm sorry, 1953. In 1953, the U.S. Air Force officially adopted the term unidentified flying object to describe the sightings of these objects in the sky that couldn't be identified. And the term was a part of a larger effort to standardize the language around this aerial phenomenon. The idea of UFOs being a theory didn't really come up until much later, after the photo I mentioned earlier with the 8 beams that was Photoshop. It was proven to be retouched by the publication. That was routine at the time. Black and white photos were often retouched, but regardless, some of the witnesses reported seeing unidentified flying objects that didn't behave like conventional aircraft. And these objects were described as cigar-shaped or round, and in some cases, they were said to have hovered or moved in strange ways. So, however, there is no solid evidence to support the idea that UFOs were involved. So most of the reports were based on eyewitness accounts, and they were never fully corroborated. So, unfortunately, the Battle of Los Angeles is a mystery to this day. Yeah. I mean, sorry. It's not. It's a mystery. It's not solved. I hate the fact that it may be a mass delusion. I mean, a mass hallucination. I can kind of see like a psychological operation too, but I can't see wasting taxpayer dollars. I can kind of see like a false flag operation, very similar to the Reichstag fire or 9/11. I can see it being an orchestrated event to push us into the war, but at the same time, I'm like, Pearl Harbor just happened. You didn't really have to do that. The only reason why I could say that if it were to be that would make sense, that would only be to soothe America's ego, because America was so embarrassed by the Pearl Harbor sneak attack that the only way to feel like they got their lick back would be to orchestrate a fake battle. That's lame. That's lame. I mean, really lame, actually, to stage a blackout only to shoot at nothing would be lame. Just so it can appear as though you got your lick back. That would be lame. Or it could be that they were so desperate to get their lick back that they just did it. I mean, they were just so desperate to get their look back that they were like, oh, the first radar blip you see, shoot it. You know what I mean? Like, it could have been ego either way. But part of me is kind of leading towards mass hysteria. Because, you know, when you're talking about a generation of people that are just so primitive, and especially wartime, I mean, World War II, Jesus Christ. Everybody's just terrified and on edge and just like all over the place. I think that it is highly likely that they were very like, shoot, just shoot it. And then we'll ask questions later. Shoot first, ask questions later. And then when they realized that there was absolutely nothing there, and they were like, oh, maybe we were just paranoid. And then they realized after that answering questions for being paranoid is incredibly embarrassing, and trying to figure out a cover story for erratically shooting at weather balloons for an hour is just too much. And then accidentally killing people because you scared them to death for an hour too. Like there's just too much going on there. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this episode. I don't even know how to feel about it, because my plan was to blame it on aliens. But by the time I got to the end of researching it, I was like, damn, I can't blame this on aliens, because aliens just don't make sense. Aliens just actually don't make sense. I can't blame it on aliens. So yeah, it's not aliens. Sorry. So I didn't even want to disappoint Sal. I was like, Sal can't be on this episode because this ain't about aliens. It's not about aliens at all. But, I love some mass hysteria. That's what I love so much about, like, I think I talked about this before, about the movie Invasion of the Body Snatcher. That's a great, like, or even like the whole atomic age, like hysteria, 1950s sci-fi era of film. That whole era is just fun. They were just scary as hell back then. They were scared of everything. Like, even if you look at like how they reacted to Vincent Price House on Haunted Hill when they released that in the theater, and they used to have the skeleton fly around in the theater. It's like, y'all thought that was real? It's like things like things like that. Is like, Jesus Christ, you people are scared of everything. But you talking about a time where they just really didn't have, they just really weren't exposed to what we're exposed to. So it is what it is. But anyway, all right. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll catch you on the flip side. Bye.